Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium's fourth in a series of webinars on the supply chain management readiness assessment. Today's webinar will focus on our Tier 4 offering, the Tailored Supply Chain Improvement Acceleration Playbook that you see right there. We appreciate you taking the time to attend today's webinar and Evolving a Resilient Enterprise, and we hope that your family is healthy and safe. My name is Jim DeVries, founder and president of Enhance International Group. I will be the host of today's webinar. We also have Connor Fitcham from the Uphaven Management, South Africa, who will be helping us facilitate today's webinar. Feel free to always ask questions in the chat, and we'll get to them as soon as we can. The Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium has been delivering education webinars, workshops, and consulting focusing on supply chain risk and resiliency for the past 12 years. Joining with me today is Greg Schlegel. Greg will be sharing his expertise. Greg is one of the original founders of Supply Chain Risk and Resiliency and the former president of Apex, now ASCM. Greg, a few words of introduction.
Hey, thanks, Jim. Thanks, everyone, for sitting with us today to talk about something we feel very passionate about: supply chain improvement, risk management. I'm the founder of the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium. We've been in business for about 13 years. I'll give you a thumbnail sketch on who we are and what we do in a minute. Spent 8 years as a supply chain exec with IBM, 35 years as a supply chain practitioner for several Fortune 100s, perhaps like several of you on the call. I've taught supply chain management at 6 different US universities. And as Jim mentioned, I was president of Apex, now ASCM, back in the late 80s. So great to be with you. I'll turn it back to Jim for a minute.
Thanks, Greg. And just a little background on myself. For the past 30 years, I've worked at Fortune 500 companies as a master black belt supply chain and transformation executive. And currently, I focus on operating as a master integrator. I served as a resilient leader for startups to Fortune 500 companies and have worked with global teams to identify, prioritize, and deliver high return on investment improvements. And I've led leadership positions in sales, supply chain, finance, reporting, new product development, field ops, and operational excellence. My career started in the 1980s under Jack Welch. That's a little bit of background on myself. Again, welcome everyone. We hope that this is useful to you. Everything is recorded. It will be sent to you. The slides will be sent to you afterwards. We do have a survey question that you can answer at any time. And so feel free to answer the survey question. And when you join pollev.com, Greg Schlegel 910, that is also in the chat. With that, Greg, a few words about the consortium.
You bet. We said we'd give you a thumbnail sketch. This is a quick profile of who we are and what we do. We're up to, I think, 31 companies now. That's about 1,700 supply chain risk professionals around the globe. These companies bring tools, techniques, methodologies, and software solutions to help us identify, assess, mitigate, and manage supply chain risks. So we break it out on the right side. You can see we have 3 pillars. We do a lot of education. We have consultancies, and then we have software as a service to do a lot of the heavy lifting in supply chain management and risk. On the left, we have our products and services. Very proud of these 5 areas. We have an online education. We have 2 certification courses. One is a basic course in supply chain risk and resiliency. The other is geared towards public healthcare and service supply chains. You receive a certificate at the end. You go through an MBA type assessment and report out, and then you receive a certificate from the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium and our education partner, Educazi. 2, we do a lot of coaching and consulting, leading, guiding, directing, and coaching companies in their journeys. Again, we have the software as a service solutions to do heavy lifting for you. And then we're real proud of the last two. We have two online assessment tools. One is supply chain management online readiness. We're going to talk about that and focus on that today. That deals in taking a look at your supply chain process maturity. And the other on the bottom is an online supply chain risk and resiliency 90-day action plan. And that gets into identifying your risk maturity, your company's risk appetite, and your company's culture, going through surveys using AI and ML algorithms. So with that, I'll turn it back to Jim.
Thanks, Greg. Appreciate it. A little background on Enhanced International Group. It's EIG is a passionate group of experts, 50 consultants, consulting companies, and SaaS providers with over 5,000 practitioners that serves as the way to improve your company. EIG serves as that master integrator to provide you access to the best and brightest companies, these companies, and we act more like a Swiss Army knife. Our team is dedicated to empowering your organization's workforce by leveraging EIG's partnership tenured thought leadership network. Our goal is to exceed your expectations with customized, predictable, sustainable, and repeatable self-funding programs. If we look at our bicycle slide that we like to look at here, it is focused on supply chain, making it a priority in your ecosystem. And you might have heard the saying that we're only as strong as our weakest link. And if we take it a step further and we look at the strategy wheel, that's your driving wheel. That's what drives your company. A single rotation of a solid strategy will result in many execution cycles. So a strongly linked strategy to execution ecosystem creates that positive momentum for your company, its employees, customers, suppliers, and stockholders. In summary, there are 3 considerations in managing a supply chain. Are you making linked decisions between strategic, tactical, and operational horizons? A mantra that we use here in this offering. Linking strategy through execution will build your cadence. So what's your cadence? And how can you make your cadence better in your organization to drive profitability and scalability? And a solid strategy should result in many execution cycles, resulting in momentum and cadence that will be built. Quoting Albert Einstein, life is like a bicycle. To keep your balance, you need to keep on moving. So we'll get moving here on the webinar. And this is, again, the 4th in the webinar series. Our first webinar that you can find on the consortium website is our best-in-class benchmarking webinar of a single user, which is available for free for everyone. The second is a webinar focused on Tier 2, where we looked at strategic, tactical, and operational strengths that we just discussed. Webinar 3 is on the benchmark comparison of aligning your action plan to your company. So where are you relative to your competitors, and how aligned are you in your action plans for your company to drive continuous improvement into your supply chains? And today's webinar is about this, the management readiness playbook for your company. And then our 5th webinar will be basically how to sell supply chain management to your company. We'll have case studies and building a readiness for supply chain risk and resiliency, our other passion. So with that, our agenda today is, first, we're going to have the compelling reasons to focus on supply chain management readiness. The second is we're going to look at Tier 4 offering, the improvement acceleration playbook, and then we'll look at the outputs of the playbook, and then we look at accelerating time to value, provide you some ways to help you sell internally on how supply chain management can increase your bottom line return on investments, and then your 5th is on the takeaways for the supply chain management readiness. With that, Greg?
You bet. Thanks a lot, Jim. We thought we'd start with sharing some compelling reasons to focus on supply chain readiness. So with that, we'll move into the first compelling reason from our point of view, and that's building a resilient enterprise. This definition comes from our book. We feel this is the best definition that we've seen over our 13 years. And we'll just kind of articulate it to you. What is a resilient enterprise? It has the capacity to overcome disruptions and continually transform itself to meet the changing needs and expectations of who? Its customers, its shareholders, and other stakeholders. We'll be honest with you, that's a pretty tall order, but that's the best, most comprehensive definition we've seen in our 13 years in the risk space, and essentially we have it inside of our book. We have more. All right. This is supply chain issues from top manufacturers' concerns. It came from the Manufacturers Association, pretty recent. We just wanted to share it with you, where these manufacturing execs ranked their primary current business challenges. We'll just go through the top 5. Number 1, you can see attracting and retaining a quality workforce. That is going to be ongoing, sadly enough. Number 2, here we are, supply chain challenges. We could talk about them for hours. That's number 2. Third one is increased raw material costs. Yes, it's out there, started last year. Fourth is transportation and logistics costs. That is abating a bit since the pandemic. And then the 5th was rising healthcare and insurance costs for employees. So we wanted to share with you a couple of compelling reasons to look at your supply chain process maturity, and especially give you some insight from other manufacturers. So with that, we still have a few more. There will be, this is coming from our friends at the conference board. It will probably be a tumultuous 2023 beginning, folks. This is a profile from them recently on US real GDP growth. It's US centric. Basically, on the left side of the red arrow is essentially the history of the US GDP by major element. You can see the legend on the bottom right. And then on the right side of the red arrow is their projections going forward. And it's not really a pretty sight, folks, for 2023. So we wanted to share that with you, again, to give you a sense of some compelling reasons to act. We have a few more to share with you. Back in 2021 on the left here, this is a Gartner global survey. They share a lot of information with us. The global survey basically posed a few questions, and then the respondents agreed, they were neutral, or they disagreed. The legend, the blue is we agree with that statement. The yellow is the neutral, and the gray is we disagree with your statement. I just want to focus on the top two. They pose this to the audience. Within 2 years, we will invest to make our supply chains more agile. 90% said, yeah, we're going to do that. You know, the other top element was, within 2 years, we will invest to make our supply chains more resilient. Music to our ears. Again, almost 90% agreed that they are going to do something. Now, let's move forward to 2023. And we have a few insights to share with you. The big one was the question up on the top: in which geographic area has your company increased operations on the ground? And you can see Canada, the big one was the United States, 88% increase. Mexico, Central America, South America, and other. The net is it's North America, folks. All right, North and basically South America. And we have more to share with you. McKinsey talks about, they call it the rewiring of global supply chain ecosystems. That came out of a 2023 report. They also say global ties are still binding. So it's kind of a push-pull. Every major region in the globe still imports about 25% or more of at least one key resource it needs. That comes from the McKinsey report. They also basically said that China has demonstrated that it's maybe no longer a reliable partner for a myriad of reasons, folks. And then finally, CNBC in November of 22 came out with a couple of statistics as well. This is November of 2022. US shippers are seeing a 20% drop in ocean freight orders. Ocean carriers are canceling as much as 50% of their sailings. A lot of them are what we call ghost sailings, sailings with no material and product. And the Asia to West Coast prices have come down almost 80% from last year. So the logistics pricing party is over. All right, we're getting closer to back to normal, if you want to call it that. But it will be a different world from 2 years ago, folks. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jim and he'll share a few more with you.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that on that last note is that we generally, the logistics leads the manufacturing. So it's not uncommon for logistics now that it's reduced. Now everything else will come into play on the product side. So now that the logistics has, so that's generally lag is 6 months to a year, which lines up pretty closely to the GDP slide that we just covered. And how does that affect us from an M&A perspective? So we look at M&A as, you know, you're either going to be bought or you're going to buy somebody else, or somebody, one of your competitors is going to buy somebody who's going to, and that's going to affect your marketplace. So that's why we look at it. In this first graph, it's the number of deals, 2019, 2020, 21, and last year. And you can see it's oscillated there. Last year was going down a bit on the number and from $1 and $1 per. So the deals in 2022 are what they call the tale of two halves. The first half continuing the momentum from 2021. Market volatility over the summer certainly gave deal makers pause. And despite the revival of the mega deals, greater than 10 billion in Q4, the average deal size fell from 67 million to $50 million. So in 2022, the M&A struggled to keep pace with the record-setting 2021, and we saw an aggregated deals values down 37% year over year. The deal volumes again saw a return to pre-pandemic levels, nearly on par with 2019. The macro environmental challenges hindered aggregate deal values, notably in the second half, with elevated inflation and rising rate environment impacting deal financing. So a lot of the big deals that you saw last year, some of the big deals were in the that you read in the paper, so to speak, of course, was the that nobody could miss was the Elon Musk deal of buying Twitter. Some other ones, notable deals were Kroger buying Albertsons, and another one was Adobe buying Figma. And what we see in 2021 versus 2022 is the industrials were predominant, followed by healthcare, financials, and information technology. So depending on what sector you're in, this is what's 2022 ended up. And we only expect, I think what they're saying is we expect to see at least as many deals this year or more as companies become more at risk because of what we know what's happening now is a low demand economy right now. And so that's what leads us right into why do you benchmark and what is benchmarking? So as it says on the right there, benchmarking is a process where you measure your company's success against your or relative to your competitors to discover how to improve performance. So how does this play out? there are 5 different major benchmarking types. There's a general best practices, which is industry agnostic, comparing you to everyone. Then there's process benchmarking, where you compare internal and external processes and how you fit relative to other companies in general. Then you have strategic benchmarking, which compares strategy, business approaches, and business models to strengthen your strategic planning and determine your strategic priorities. Then you have performance or competitive benchmarking, which involves collecting information on how well you're doing relative to your competitors. And then you have industry benchmarking up and down your supply chain, raw materials to end. So looking at your supply chain end to end. So our tier 3 benchmark focuses on the industry benchmark performance, on how you're performing relative to your competitors. And we break it up into 4 quartiles. And what we learn is, from an MBA 401 perspective, is that companies in the first quartile are buying other companies. Companies in the second quartile are probably selling their goods. They're focused on selling. They're not looking at buying or being bought. Companies in the third quartile are being bought. And the fourth quartile are going out of business, and maybe some remnants of those companies are being bought. So how does that look on a benchmark scale? We go from highest to lowest here, and we name our quartiles our leaders at the top, our followers, and then average and laggards. So that's how we lay it out in our tool. So we'll see, are you best in class? Are you a leader? Are you follower, average, or laggards? So how well are you positioned in your industry is the real question for us. So with that, we'll move to the survey question. And the question again is, how comfortable are you in understanding your supply chain is performing relative to your competitors? And we have a really good feedback. We appreciate that. Greg, your comments?
Yeah, you bet. Again, there's no right or wrong, folks, but it's kind of a level set question. We always talk about when was the last time, I don't know if we have this in there this time as a question, but when was the last time you actually took a hard look at your supply chain processes and their maturity? So we appreciate you engaging with us. Again, there's no right or wrong answer. We're trying to make everyone aware of why, the compelling reason why we feel you should be taking a hard look at all your supply chain maturity, process maturity levels. So thanks a lot for engaging in the questionnaire.
Thank you again. With that, we'll just move into our readiness assessment offerings here. Our tier 1 is the free online tool, where we have over 100 users. A little bit more on that later. Tier 2 is the best in class benchmark. So you're comparing yourself on that primary benchmark level that we discussed. But we also look at it from a strategic, tactical, and operational perspective of where you fit on that. And it's also a group exercise. So the cool thing about this is it compares how you're performing, how you think you're performing in your organization, and having your finance, your supply chain, your operations, your logistics, and salespeople all commenting on your supply chain and how well it's operating. So that's a really interesting exercise to get that cross-functional feedback. The third is, again, building on that feedback, asking those same group of executives, how are you performing relative to the industry? How are you performing relative to your goals in the company? And setting up a improvement prioritization process. And with that, we will provide 16 hours of consulting for that offering. And then our tier 4 that we're talking about today is about the supply chain improvement acceleration playbook, which is tailored to your needs by completing tiers 1 through 3 and having interviews with your stakeholders, and we'll be able to prioritize those action plan for you to build a more resilient supply chain. And then we'll get you on the roadmap to start supply chain risk and resiliency. If you're not very mature in supply chain, it's really tough to get into supply chain risk and resiliency. So our focus here is to get you going on supply chain and then finding a way for you to launch your risk and resiliency program. And of course, a improvement action plan that is very direct for you. And with that is 32 hours of coaching. So Greg will kick us off with walking us through.
Yep.
Greg?
Yep. We thought we'd get you grounded, give you some compelling reasons to act, get you grounded on the entire profile of the readiness assessment. We'll talk a little bit about tier 4, which is a tailored acceleration playbook. Kind of just give you a quick glance as to what it looks like. Basically, the goal of the playbook is to provide you a set of proven best practices to identify, assess, mitigate, and manage your supply chain processes proactively. All right. Kind of the description in the book contains descriptions, diagrams, scenarios for your supply chain management team. All right. Again, it's more or less curated for you. It's tailored. The sections look like this. There's a tailored assessment section of the current business maturity, your as is position. Then there's a customized improvement that we will provide aligned to your business scenarios and your cadence, as Jim mentioned. There's also in the book a set of tactics to engage your supply chain management team to perform at a higher level. And then there's also a set of strategies going forward for your executive team to essentially lead, guide, direct, and coach your team to gain those benefits through improvement. So we have more and more on the complexion of the playbook in a minute, and I'll turn it back to Jim.
So before we go into it in detail, we just want to discuss a little bit about the major elements of an enterprise, because we talk about what an end-to-end enterprise supply chain is, and we talk about our value chain activities, which are in there as infrastructure, HR, technology development, and procurement. And we also define what we call our primary activities, which are aligned to your sales activities for your product offerings, which is inbound logistics operations, outbound marketing and sales and services. So we know through Porter and others that this model is based on that you need to, in order to create value, we need to be focused on business margin and supply chain management cost. So creating value that exceeds the cost of conducting that activity and generate a sustained profit. So we're going to jump over to the Gartner supply chain resilient demand-driven maturity model that was put out 10 over years ago, but it rings well today. On the y-axis, we have mindset. Are you looking at your company from an inside-out perspective or an outside-in perspective? Or from a target perspective, are you targeting yourself on cost or service? So generally, when you're at stage 1, your business units are disjointed. They're all focusing on their own revenue. You're not scalable. And if you try to make things adaptable, it's very expensive to get folks to work together. Stage 2 is you start organizing business units, grouping those business units, those individual companies, you might almost call them, into business units. And here the goal is to become standardized. But we all know that one size doesn't fit all. This is a good step and a necessary step, but it's still scalable is not, it's not always scalable and adaptable as you would like. On the third, when you hit stage 3 here, and that's where your outcome is, where you're starting to really optimize and really taking advantage of the 20, 40, or 50 companies that you bought to make up your business units. Now you're in that customized, optimized stage. And this is where you start recognizing value equals profit. And this is a hybrid case. Generally, most companies, they get to stage 3 and they fall apart and they go back to stage 1, and a new CEO comes in and they tear everything apart and they start all over again. I call it the 1, 2, 3 step. And it's famous. You'll see it time and time again. Companies will get to barely to stage 3. An economic downturn like this happens, CEOs will either get wiped out because of underperforming, but it's, you know, is that an economic issue or is it actually the CEO's fault? But they lose momentum. So getting to stage 4, there's only a handful of companies that have made it this far to stage 4, and only a very, very few get to stage 5. And of course, stage 5 is where you become scalable, value-centric, and margin to serve for the customers. So this is a well-known, well-documented, and there's hundreds of case studies on this. And if you have any questions on this, we've been more than happy to share. The main thing here is, you know, where are you today? If you're at stage 1, you're at stage 1. You can't go to stage 1 to stage 5. You're going to have to go through stage 2. It's an arduous journey. With that, I'm going to keep going here to talk about, well, how do you get there? We believe that one of the first steps you're going to need to take is set up a balanced set of measures and the 4 perspectives of the balanced scorecard. This is very important to set up. You need to be looking at it from a financial perspective, customer perspective, your internal businesses, and growth and learning. So you need strategies around each one of those, internal goals around each one of those. As far as building KPIs, we all talk about key process indicators, and very often we end up with hundreds and thousands of KPIs, too many KPIs. So what we like to do is put them into different categories and frameworks. You have the framework of the balanced scorecard we just discussed, the areas of risk. You want to identify where do you need to focus: planning, supply, demand, operations. Those are the risk areas, and the type of risk. You want to look at your risk in your KPIs at the strategic, tactical, and operational levels in your company. And then you want to identify your KPIs. Again, we could spend a whole webinar just talking about KPIs and building KPI hierarchies. But part of this, the playbook will be, we will assess where you are, what KPIs you're using today, and help you identify those 2 to 3 KPIs that you need to focus on going forward, so you're not focusing on 100 KPIs. And so that kind of wraps us up into what you get out of the supply chain improvement acceleration playbook. How mature are your supply chain processes? What are your strengths and weaknesses? How do you measure up within your industry? What's important to you? And how does this link to your bottom line? And what action plan is necessary to improve your position? And what are the benefits to be derived of your business? Again, the bottom line is there's going to be there's a lot of things you can identify, and you're only as strong as your weakest link, as we always say. So where do you focus? How do you leverage your strengths to drive your overall growth of your company? With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Greg.
Yep, you bet. As you can see, the acceleration playbook is pretty comprehensive, folks. We want to share with you as many elements that you receive and benefits and deliverables. We're trying to give you a sense of what the complexion of the playbook would look like. We'll also go back, for those of you who've been with us in this series, and especially for those who have not. The playbook is built on 4 different tiers, and we'll just want to give you a real quick sense of the tier recaps that are sitting inside the assessment tool. So from a tier 1 recap, folks, this is a free tool. I'll give you a quick thumbnail sketch about what you're looking at on the bottom left in a minute, but we have almost 200 total professionals in the tool right now in many levels of progress, but it's free. All right, so we're going to provide you enough links that you can get in and do it, try it, fix it. But tier 1 is basically a profile of your as is supply chain process maturity. So what's it look like? On the bottom left is the star chart, kind of a Likert chart, star chart, call it what you will. Essentially, it's made up of 13 tenets. We think, in our point of view, there's these 13 tenets are what represent a good end-to-end supply chain. We break up the tenets into strategic, which are blue, red, which are tactical, and the army green, which are operational. Then when you fill out the survey, essentially the black line that you see is your as is condition, and that represents the level of supply chain maturity. Now, what do we mean by level? The farther away you are from the center with the black line, the less mature your supply chain processes are. We also provide you a sense of risk. So you can see the 3 circles. The green circle is low risk, where many of the exemplar companies operate. From green to red through the orange is less mature supply chain processes, but more inherent risk. And then if you're at or outside what we call the ring of fire, which is the red circle, you have very immature supply chain processes and a heck of a lot of inherent risk within those processes. So what's the outcome of tier 1? You basically get to assess and see your mature and immature processes. You can investigate the immature processes. You can reinforce your mature processes. And then kind of the call to action is essentially to develop an action plan that addresses the immature processes and get all your stakeholders aligned together to improve those immature processes. What does good look like? Well, improvements being made and notable increase in your maturity over time. So you start to benchmark yourself over time in terms of what kinds of improvements are you implementing and what are the benefits to be derived. We have more. We said we'd recap the tiers. This is tier 2. Business units perspective. This is a group exercise. Tier 1 is an individual exercise, one person. In tier 2, when you get into the model, we advocate that you bring 5 to 8 different executives into the tool. What does the tool produce? From a picture point of view, you can see the same profile of the 13 tenets. You can see the black line in this example is the organization's as is. And then what we do is we superimpose strategic, tactical, and operational as is strengths on top of the chart. And for this particular instance, this organization basically its strength were strategic, that's the blue. The lower the number that you see on the screen, the stronger the processes. So they were pretty strong in strategic processes, then came tactical, and then came operational. And so what are the outputs again? It's a business unit perspective because it's a collective decision and answer on supply chain process maturity. It profiles your processes, strengths, and weaknesses. You can take a look at your strategic, tactical, and operational level. What's the call to action? Well, you get to validate your supply chain process maturity and take a look at strategic, tactical, and operational profiles. All right. And what does good look like at the end? Your business unit has a consensus in terms of what are our strengths, what are our weaknesses, and then you can move forward. And we also have, I think, about 8 hours of coaching in this particular tier. So with that, we'll move into tier 3. Again, giving you a quick recap. This is cross-functional. It's now an industry benchmark, so you're moving up you're leveraging tier 1, tier 2 data. And then essentially, as Jim mentioned, we have the 4 quartiles: leaders, followers, average, and laggards. And essentially, we position your organization within the industry benchmark. You might say, how do we do that? We have been doing this for 10 years, so we have hundreds, if not thousands, of benchmark data points across almost every type of industry sector. So what do you get on the output? You take a look at your supply chain maturity position within your industry now. How do you relate? That's why we asked the question early on. How do you relate, and or how are you positioned within your industry? You can take a look at that. You can understand your industry's relative position towards your organization. What's the call to action? You validate your supply chain process maturity again, and you can benchmark yourselves if you start to improve, to essentially see how you're faring over time relative to others in your industry. So what does good look like in this tier? Well, if you're happy with the position you're in, we help you maintain that position with guidance. If you're not happy with the position, we essentially can assist you in improving your position within that process, within that supply chain process. So with that recap, I'll turn it back to Jim and he'll finish up this section.
Thanks, Greg. So we went through deliverable 1. Next, we will go through deliverable 2 for the tier 3. And for tier 3, the output here is around looking at the importance of each of the tenants and your satisfaction and how well you're performing today internally with your cross-functional team. So the outputs here are business unit perspective on what's important within your supply chain. So again, it's that business unit's perspective on where to focus, what's important to you, and how satisfied, how are you performing today? And then there's a ranking here of each of the tenants for both importance and satisfaction, so you can find that synergistic look at it. So the practical call to action here is an aligned action plan relative to your business priorities. So you can look at this as like a mini AOP exercise that you're taking on right now. And this takes very little time compared to what you would have to do for a major annual operation planning exercise. The value prop for this is you get validated the supply chain improvement rankings in your company and your discussions about the alignment across all your stakeholders. So again, it's this alignment that we always want to focus on, so that when you do have a call to action and you are working together, you're all aligned. And what does good look like? If you believe the ranking, you'll help develop that action plan to drive improvements for sustainability. And if you don't believe the ranking, we'll assist you to improve the consensus. And this kind of even goes back to a question that I saw in the chat on maturity of going from 3 to 4 to 5. How do you overcome that? Well, it's really there's 2 ways to overcome regressing back to level 1 and 2. And that is to build enough infrastructure in your organization as you build up 1, 2, and 3 through processes like this of gaining alignment of all your middle management folks that we're going to keep improving regardless on who's on top. If you have that, you're going to be able to make it past. Or your leader. If the leadership team continues forward in your new leadership team as it transforms, and every company it does, if it transforms, it keeps their eye on the ball, so to speak, of continuing to improve the supply chain. That's the key. This offering here for deliverable 2 is 16 hours of coaching and consulting. So overall, on the tier 4, we've talked a little bit about the supply chain improvement acceleration playbook. The output, of course, is the playbook. We've talked about that. The practical call to action is a tailored supply chain improvement acceleration playbook to match your business mission, aligned to your vision of your company. So If your mission that you're focusing on here is not aligned to your vision of your company, most likely you're not going to make it past level 3 in maturity, just pulling that back into the fold. There are 3 types of perspectives that we take in terms of building this out. We look at it from a practitioner perspective, academician, and Big 5 consulting. So we look at it from all different perspectives to give you the best value. And the value proposition here, of course, is the improvements that follow are in a concerted roadmap that is prioritized to your needs to maximize your maturity in the shortest amount of time. So how do you march through those levels of maturity in the shortest amount of time? We want to make sure you do the right things at the right time, in the right way, in the right order. And then what does good look like? You're improving your weak processes, your weakest link. You're sustaining your strong process. You're not robbing Peter to pay Paul, so to speak, which often happens when you make improvements in your company. And you're, of course, improving the bottom line. And both from a cost and a margin perspective, you're garnering more market share, you're serving your customers better, and you're improving your position with within the industry from a industry benchmark perspective. This involves about 32 hours of consulting and coaching. With that, back to Greg.
You bet. Again, we said we'd give you a picture image of the complexion of the supply chain acceleration playbook. We wanted to kind of just further that thread a little bit and talk about accelerating time to value and ROI. So we thought we'd share this. This comes from Gartner and Aberdeen over the years. Essentially, there are a couple key elements in supply chain performance that supply chain folks get paid well to do well. And that is, at the moment, if you're in supply chain, you are required to help grow revenue. You are required to help grow profitability. You're required to improve capital utilization and lower the cost of capital. So let's take a look at some of the benefits, or I'll say performances, that exemplar supply chain companies are achieving. From a revenue point of view, sure, they're improving delivery almost up to 99.9%. They're bringing stockouts down relative to their peers from anywhere from 0 to 5%. They're reducing cycle times all the time, even during the pandemic. Exemplars are increasing market share, top line and bottom line, and they're improving speed to market. From a revenue point of view, from a profitability point of view, the exemplars experience a 7% cost advantage over average performers. And they're reducing markdowns and scrap anywhere from 40 to 50% on a regular basis. From a capital utilization point of view, the exemplars exercise 40 to 65% advantage in cash-to-cash cycle times. That's huge, all right? If you're not using cash-to-cash cycle time as a metric of supply chain performance and risk mitigation, get out on Wikipedia, go find the algorithm. It's very easy. All you need is inventory, payables, and receivables, and start measuring that. It's a great metric, all right? And then finally, on cost of capital, the exemplars are running with 40 to 80% less inventory. Now, it is changing a little bit, folks, because there's a big, robust dialogue around the globe talking about super efficient inventory versus resilient inventory. So there's a big dialogue going on right now between being efficient, totally efficient, versus being resilient because of the pandemic and other disruptions. But again, cost of capital, the exemplars are reducing inventories anywhere from 10 to 50%. So we have a few more. We thought we'd share this with you. Coming out of the industry benchmark data that we have available to us, and essentially some data coming from friends of the consortium, we thought we'd share some salient statistics with you. So on the top left, here are some supply chain benchmark KPIs from friends of the consortium. For instance, on revenue growth and margin, from Gartner and Institute of Business Forecasting, you can see some top line growth, higher margins, and customer delivery in terms of being in laggards or going from a laggard to an average, average to follower, and then follower to a leader. You can see the accretive benefits you can derive by improving your supply chain process performance and your maturity. Next one, EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. That comes from our friends at Chainalytics. You can see the metrics, cost to serve, capital management improvement, and increased net pricing. You can see the accretive nature of improving your supply chain process maturity. Third, down the bottom left, RONA, return on net assets. That comes from Gardner. Take a look, less inventory, higher inventory turns than your peers, fewer stockouts than your peers, and you can see the accretive nature of improvement. And then finally, on the bottom from Hackett Group, the cash conversion cycle. If you want to take a look at that, Hackett Group is very good. That's what they focus on, cash conversion cycle. You can see the CCC, the return on capital, and OTIF, which is on time and in full delivery. You can see the metrics of success as a company moves from being a laggard to a leader. So again, we wanted to share that with you in terms of achievable metrics to give you a sense of how do you feel about achieving those potential improvements
So we
going
have a
from
question.
laggard. Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Which of these would you consider any of these leading, or are these lagging metrics?
It's a good question. They're not econometric model metrics, folks. They are not. All right.
Right.
They are supply chain, operational, and tactical metrics of success. I'm not sure there are any leading indicators
one.
in this. There
I
are
don't see
not.
one.
I'm being honest. My first
Yeah.
flush reaction, folks, is there are none. These are tactical and operational within the supply chain arena. That's my best answer.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
Overall.
Yep. All right. We thought we'd give you some more helpful hints on tier 4. So just think about this. Maybe exercise tier 1. It's free, folks. It's free. Go ahead in there, give it a shot, assess your supply chain process maturity. It's free. All right. Then maybe think about securing a supply chain management process lead if you don't have one today. Maybe if you do, maybe you think about securing an executive sponsor. Why? You need an executive sponsor for 2 reasons, folks, to be successful: funding, moolah, and executive cover, we call it. All right. Next, have an honest conversation with your team and peers who don't report to you, but who impact supply chain regarding the supply chain process maturity of your plant, your division, or your organization. Then validate your SCM vision. What do we mean by that? Jim mentioned that several times. Where do you want to go and how fast do you want to get there? All right. And that way you can start to entertain tier 2, 3, and 4. And then finally, hey, maybe contact us. We'll accumulate the data from all the assessment tiers and outcomes and potentially build out an SCM improvement acceleration playbook for you going forward. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jim.
So with that culmination, we'll talk about the culmination of tiers 1, 2, 3 to build tier 4 here. And we put this together. The deliverables, we have outcomes from the tier 1 and tier 2. We look at it from the strategic, tactical, and operational perspectives. And then tier 3, we look at your industry position, tenant importance, and satisfaction. So those are the deliverables that you gain from tiers 1 through 3. We put those together and align those to your supply chain objectives and develop supply chain objectives. Each one of them, you may come up with a set of different objectives. And then we then culminate those into concerted action items. Just like KPIs, all of a sudden you can have runaway objectives, and we will work with you to come up with a concerted set of actions, which will translate into the playbook. So one of the biggest challenges, I think, in most companies is what do you work on? And most importantly, what do you not work on is the major questions when rolling out an action plan that's aligned to your supply chain. So again, what do you get from the readiness assessment? You get the playbook, you get the rankings of tier 1 through 3, you get some top 10 questions to ask your organization of what is important to them from a supply chain perspective. Then we will do the on-site and virtual stakeholder interviews so we can gain a alignment and insight from them. And then we'll put together that roadmap for you from our years of experience, and we'll get you ready to launch supply chain risk and resiliency, which everyone wants to do. And then we will come up with that action plan playbook, the what and the how in detail, and involving about 32 hours of coaching. So that's what you get for tier 4. With that, Greg will close us out with the takeaways from today's webinar.
You bet. Thanks a lot, Jim. Just a real quick couple of takeaways, folks. One, remember that tier 1 is free. All right. We went through and gave you a quick thumbnail sketch of the chart on the left, where you can look at your as is, then you can see where the risks are in the different circles. And so you kind of get a twofer. You get where you are, how mature your processes are, and inherent risk. And essentially, as you go through that, let us know. When you go through and you finish tier 1, maybe, tell us how you felt about the process. We're always looking to upgrade the user experience. Maybe tell us who you collaborated with. If you have any surprises, tell us what those surprises were. And you can contact us, go to the website, you can contact me or Jim. And then the URL, the free URL, is down in the bottom. Just click on the link and get in there and take a look at it. Next takeaway. We wanted to give you a sense of the activity level in tier 1, which is free. We launched it in August of last year. It's leveraged by many of our licensees and partners. Again, we have 31 companies in the consortium, but we have over 100 active users, more than that in total, but active meaning they've gone in and they've started to answer the questions. Some have completed. You can take a look at it. Very encouraging. It goes across the board, folks. Those 200 and some odd folks are across almost every industry sector that you could imagine, including healthcare and NGOs as well. So very encouraging, because remember, we have 2 tools. When you go into tier 1, you are asked one critical question. Do you manufacture stuff, or do you just move stuff? Are you, a service organization? Are you into public healthcare where you're moving and the bulk of your supply chain is logistics? Answer that correctly, and you will go to 2 different tier 1 surveys, just to make sure you're aware of that. And finally, tier 4, again, your playbook. That's what we were talking about all day today. Just again, if you're interested in the playbook, essentially contact us and we'll talk about, again, tiers 1 through 4. Let us know how you feel. If you have some essential requirements or questions of discovery, feel free to hit our website, my email address, and or Jim's. So with that, I'll turn it back to Jim and he can close it out.
Just as a closing, couple things is We have our webinar coming up on March 21st. We look forward to you joining us there. There we'll talk about some case studies and how to survive in the VUCA world. Lots of case studies and return on investment sharings and how to sell it internally to your team. So with that, again, we conclude today's webinar. Thank you so much for joining us and participating. Fantastic questions throughout. And Greg, some closing comments?
You betcha. Again, thanks a lot for attending. We shared with you our comprehensive level of the SCM readiness assessment approach. We focused on tier 4, the playbook. We hope that you see the accretive nature of our methodology within this assessment tool in terms of improving your supply chain processes, especially understanding your strengths and weaknesses and where you reside from a maturity point of view within your own industry. So why are we providing this? To give your supply chain what we would affectionately call the booster shot in times of crisis. We want to accelerate your time to value, and we want to help you survive and thrive in what we call this VUCA, VUCA environment that we're living in. So again, thanks a lot for your time. We appreciate it. Jim?
Yeah, and I just add a few comments and say, again, to reiterate, we want to help you survive and thrive in this downturn. We all know that right now there's a lack of demand in the marketplace. Take this time to improve and embolden your supply chains. It doesn't take a lot of effort. Talking about 30, 40 minutes of your time just to get an idea of where you're at and gain some alignment across your organization, or how you're going to take this time to make improvements in your organization so you can come out of this recession stronger than you were when you came in. Thank you so much and have a great day.
All the best.